I'm Sierra,
I'm May. I'm Ivory.
I'm Colin.
and we're going to be giving you the summary for Chapter 4 from the management textbook.
Called Creative Problem Solving and Decision Making.
Yeah.
And first up is going to be Ivory with Problem Solving and Decision Making and Overview.
So, for this section, it was basically giving you the tools you need so you can help minimize your amount of stress when it comes to having a productive business. In this case, for one, it's guidelines on, like, first you need to, like, plan out, have a great plan, a great strategy of what you want to do, which when you have a plan, it makes it easier on you so you can have less error, and plus you know how to work your way to your goal that you're trying to get in the process. You can also get assign people to help you reach that goal. That comes with a word called staffing, and by you staffing, you will you train your employees to do what you would do basically. And once you teach them how to get the the job done, then it helps balance out the amount of work. And it also helps minimize error. It will be some error in the beginning, but as long as you work together, it'll help fix that. Another part was for the decision making styles, you have reflexive style, which basically it consisted of a person that likes to work quickly without taking the time to get the information that they need. But the pro to that is you're working fast and you're getting the job done. But the con to that is that you will possibly make error because you will not have the information help back you up. So you could be also giving false information to what you are trying to do, I guess. And then another one is reflective styles, and that is you taking plenty of time to make a decision, gathering considerable information, and analyzing several alternatives. Pro to that is that you will get everything done in a precise manner, and you have less error. But the con to that will be that it will take longer to get the job done. Which the longer you take, you could be missing really important keys that you could have got done if you hadn't taken so much time in the process. And then for the decision-making model, the first step, of course, classify and define the problem of opportunity. Second, set objectives and criteria. Third, generate creative and innovative alternatives. 4, analyze alternatives and select the most feasible. 5, plan and implement the decision, and control the decision is the last one. Now, even though you have this model, you will not necessarily get everything done in a precise manner because you may have to, once you get to the bottom, you may have to go back to the beginning because you may have to rework your process over because it may have you might end up with a big situation in the beginning. So you have to rethink your process over again and try to rework it in a slow manner and try to get a better outcome. But yeah, that's all it is to the problem solving and decision making. For the next one, we'll have classify and define the problem or opportunity.
That's going to be me. So I have classify and define the problem opportunity, which is step 1 of the decision-making model. And one interesting thing mentioned at the beginning here is about half of the decisions made by managers fails to solve the problem that they're aimed at fixing, which is most of the time failure to classify and define the problem. And then to be more successful at this, you should use the decision-making model introduced in the last section. So the first step is to classify the problem. And here there are 2 different ways you can classify. You can classify using the decision-making structure or the decision-making conditions. For the decision-making structure, there's 2 different types. There's programmed decisions and non-programmed decisions. Programmed decisions are those that arise in recurring and routine situations where you should consult decision rules, organizational policies, and procedures to make the decision, and therefore it is not necessary to follow the steps of the decision-making model for this type of decision structure. The next decision-making structure is non-programmed decisions, which are significant decisions that arise in non-recurring and non-routine situations where you should consult the decision-making model to make your decision. The second way to classify is decision-making conditions. Here you have three different types of conditions. You have certainty, where you know each alternative in advance so you can take quick action. Then there's risk, which is while you don't know the exact outcome of each alternative in advance, you can assign possibilities to each outcome. And then there's uncertainty, where the lack of information or knowledge makes the outcome of each alternative unpredictable, so you cannot accurately determine the probabilities. And then the next part of this is selecting the appropriate level of participation. So here you're going to choose if you want to make the decision yourself or if you want to include other people in the decision as well. And this leads to the two levels of participation: individual and group decision making. And if you look at page 104 at Exhibit 4-4, it gives you a great example of the potential advantages and disadvantages of using group decision making. And the key to success in using groups is to maximize the advantages and minimize the disadvantages. And for a general rule, for significant non-program decisions with high risk or uncertainty, you should use groups. But for program decisions with low risk or certainty, use individual decision making. And then you also have to define the problem. And the key important part to this is to distinguish symptoms from cause. So it's kind of like a cause and effect / symptoms relationship. And to start, you want to ask yourself the right questions and list the observable and describable occurrences or symptoms that indicate that a problem actually exists. And then only after this can you determine the cause of the problem. And as a check to see that you actually found the cause, if you eliminate the cause, then the symptoms should go away as well. But if not all of them go away, then you have not found the cause. And then lastly, it's important to go over the two primary decision-making types. There is rational or maximizing, which is where maximizers tend to make rational decisions of taking their time and weighing a wide range of options before choosing. And then there's also bounded rational, which is satisficing, which is combining satisfying and suffice, where people tend to make bounded rational decisions who would rather be fast and thorough. So it is important to find out and ask yourself which best describes you. And the last bit is to decide when to use each decision style. So it's best to use maximizing with rational decisions when where you would be spending more time in research using the aided decision model, where if you have more complex and more non-programmed decisions, or where you have the higher the degree of risk and uncertainty, or the more significant the decision outcome, you should use maximizing with rational. If the decision is more programmed, more certain the outcomes of the decision, or the less important the decision outcome, it's better to use the satisficing with the bounded rational decisions. And then you could also combine styles with participation, whereas when you're making group decisions, it's good to have people who are using a mix of both styles to balance both speed and quality. And up next is set objectives and criteria with Sierra.
Alright, so setting objectives. First of all, you need to make sure that your objectives are clear. The end goal should be visible and attainable. Next, they'll be setting criteria. And so when you do that, you need to specify your criteria. You need to set a performance level. And having multiple criteria helps with making that decision. And now criteria is the standard that an alternative must meet to be selected as the decision that will accomplish the objective. So when you set an objective, you need criteria to meet that objective. So there'll be different kinds of criteria. There'll be must criteria and want criteria. Now must criteria is criteria that must be met for you to achieve the objective, hence must. And then there's want criteria, which is things you want to have done while achieving the goal, but aren't necessary to achieve the goal, to achieve the objective. And so in doing this, you've got to weigh your criteria. So some criteria will be more important than others. Must criteria are essential, so they will weigh the most, and want criteria will vary in weight by importance that it's deemed throughout you trying to obtain your objective. Alright, and then section 4 is generate creative and innovative alternatives, and I'm in charge of that too, so here we go. So, first part of that is creativity and innovation. Creativity is a way of thinking that generates new ideas, while innovation is the implementation of said new idea. There's two different types of innovation, which are product innovation and process innovation. Product innovation is implementing new goods and services, while process innovation is implementing new ideas. So creativity drives innovation, and creativity is useless if not implemented. But there are creativity and innovation killers, which are the barriers that are set up as you're trying to reach these new ideas and having them implemented. And some of those are negative outlooks or language like, oh, I can't do this won't work, things like that. Alright, so the creative process is the approach to generating new ideas, and this involves 3 stages. Stage 1 is preparation. So you're going to define the problem, get others' opinions, gather facts, and generate solutions. Stage 2 is incubation and illumination. Once you've generated solutions, take a break. Take a step back, let the creativity work in the background, allow your subconscious to find out some solutions, let the solution come to you. Don't spend a lot of time sitting there racking your brain for ideas. Let some of them come to you. Put the problem under less scrutiny, and you might actually, find the problem answered by just sitting there. Illumination. Stage 3 is evaluation. So make sure your solution is the best. Check the alternatives. Test the alternatives. You can do this by having a devil's advocate. In doing that, group members will focus on defending a solution while others try to come up with reasons the solution won't work. And that approach may actually lead to more creativity, which leads to better ideas. And we're just in a happy cycle at that point. All good times. Alright, so in using information to generate alternatives, the amount of information and or alternatives depends on the problem. The more significant the decision, the more information and or alternatives you'll need. But if you have too much information or too many alternatives, the decision will become too complex and you may actually pick the wrong alternative. So you may end up with a solution that's so long-winded and roundabout when there was a better alternative right there in front of you, but you missed it because you had so many different options. So it's more of it levels depending on what you need solved. Some people use technology to generate alternatives, and this has the potential to be a great help with providing information, but the internet is full of so much fake information though, so you have to use caution. Be smart about it. Don't use Wikipedia. Alright, so another way to generate creative alternatives is to use groups. This is actually on the rise as it allows members to combine strengths to develop ideas and make decisions. And it allows a break in routine decision making, because usually it's a one-man job where people make up decisions and then the person in charge comes and makes a decision, and that's the end of that. This allows for us to come together and have a vote and make sure that we've chosen the right thing instead of just one person making decisions for all of us. There's a bunch of group decision-making techniques. One is brainstorming, and that process is when you suggest as many possible alternatives without evaluation, and then once you have all those, you guys come together as a group and build on the suggestions that you've made. There's also synetics, and this process is for generating novel alternatives through playing and fantasizing, generating interesting ideas instead of a lot of ideas. So you spend more time cultivating the idea instead of just giving as many ideas as possible. Then there's nominal grouping, and this is the process of generating and evaluating alternatives using a structured voting method. And that process actually involves 6 steps. So each group member writes out their ideas, and then you all come back and come together and write one giant list of all these ideas that the entire group can read. And then there'll be a session of clarification in which every group member has a chance to explain their idea, and then the other group members can list alternatives to that idea or point out that other ideas on the list basically say the same thing. And then the next step is ranking, and each member ranks their top 3 ideas from the list. And then the second to last step is discussion. And so then the members discuss why they ranked their ideas the way they did, like why they saw certain ideas as better ideas than others. And then they cast a secret vote. And with that vote, no one actually sees each other's votes. And then based on what people voted for, that's the best idea. Another group technique is consensus mapping. There's so many of these. And consensus mapping is the process of developing group agreement on a solution to a problem. And it's mainly used after brainstorming to categorize ideas to help find a single solution. So this is different from nominal grouping due to how if everyone can't agree, then a decision isn't reached. So you don't have to vote because that group is going to sit there until everybody is in agreement with the idea that you've chosen. The last technique is the Delphi technique. And this is when you use a series of private questionnaires to perfect the solution. So you guys will take a questionnaire, and the results of the first questionnaire will be studied, and then you use those results to create a second questionnaire, and you do this cycle of questionnaire, studying, and reusing for at least another five rounds of questioning until a consensus emerges. And all of these techniques are meant to foster creativity, which leads to innovation. And finally, we have decision trees. Then these are made after you create alternative solutions. And the decision tree is a visual picture that makes it easier to analyze the alternatives, and it helps you separate out information. And next we have section 5, which is with May.
Hi. So my section talks about analyzing alternatives and selecting the most feasible. So this section does the name. Like, it basically talks about like analyzing your alternatives and choosing the best options for your firm or your company, whatever it may be. And it talks about techniques, and there are 5 elements. And it's the break-even analysis, capital budgeting, linear programming, Querying theory, and probability theory. And with these, it talks mainly about how you could use your capital the best way possible without either wasting time or having to look more for, I guess, like financial help. And one of the most important elements of this is actually capital budgeting, because if you think about it, if you don't have enough capital to build a business, then it won't grow as much as you think it will, because then you'll need money for like equipment and like equipment such as like a machine or like a service, all those kinds of things. And then it also talks about the cost benefit, pros and cons, and intuition. And with cost benefit analysis, that's basically comparing the cost of implementing a decision to the benefits received. So you want to invest into a decision that you know will benefit you in the end. And with pros and cons, basically you want to weigh the pros and cons and have more of the pros rather than the cons. And intuition, you want to select the best alternative based on your experience and your rational judgment. And yeah, that's all I have. Next person. I have another one, but it's the trending issues, which is
Now, section 6 is with Ivory.
So now I'll be talking to you all about plan, implement the decision, and control. So this section was about how you should develop a nice plan so that you can make sure that you are achieving your objective. You need to make sure that you're fully committed to meeting that objective. And it's like you discuss the plan that you want, and once that comes into play, then you have to your goal. You have to start implementing it. Like, for example, how it said in the book, a New Year's resolution is to lose weight. That's your plan, but the only way to start implementing it is by actually planning out what you're going to do each day and be fully committed to working towards the resolution. Also, it's said how you can get like a group, like work together for it as well. Like again, discuss with the group the objective that you're trying to do, and keep in mind that you are to work towards that goal of implementing that objective. And you also need to be able to take control of the method of the objective that you want. And if you have to also make like a checkpoint if your goal is not going to solve the problem that you have, then you need to rethink your method so the overall process will work and you'll have a great piece of work in front of you. Also, this section was also talking about how you should own up to making a mistake, and it's going to be hard to own up to it, but the fact is, once you own up to it, you can begin the process of fixing that error and making sure that nobody else makes the same error in the process. And once again, you'll have a great piece of work in front of you. So, yeah. The next section will be trends and issues in management.
Okay. Trends and issues in management. This is very broad. It basically just talks about the main thing nowadays, which is technology and diversity into a company. And it talks about technology because this is obviously the huge thing now with like online and having to it's you can easily earn. Oh my god, I don't even know how to say that. You can easily earn or not earn, solve problems mainly just by using technology, and this also creates like really huge opportunities, especially in like a management environment, like a business environment. And it talks about diversity because I think that's one of the most important things when you are surrounded by different kinds of people, especially in the business environment. And you just can't be biased mainly because you're American and an American employee is working for you. You need to be more open-minded and treat people equally. And I think that's like the huge takeaway from this section for me.
Thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time. Bye.